We're going to be adding and subtracting numbers up to 100 in this module, with the questions gradually getting harder. In order for your child to do this successfully, they will need to be fairly familiar with the numicon frames and represent numbers, as you see here, with the units in the right places. In addition to this, they'll need a good understanding of tens and units and to be able to label the tens and units in numbers. If you're not sure that they are confident with this, then you might want to have a look back at some of the numicon videos and practice making numbers up to 100 with the numicon frames at home. Before we get into the main content of the video, I just wanted to quickly explain the method that we're using here and why we don't use the more traditional column method. So we will be using method 1 here, and you can see that we've got tens and units and we've got a visual representation of those numbers underneath the tens and units. We do that to help the children to visualize numbers, understand what number is, so it's less of an abstract concept, and that helps them with mental addition and subtraction later on. Once children have mastered this method, we will go on to method 2, and usually once children get onto that, they are able to pick it up quite quickly because they already have a good understanding of mental addition. So although this may not be the traditional method, please do stay with us on this and know that we will get to the column method eventually. Right, now we've covered the need to knows. Please get settled with your child as we are going to start the main content of this module. Okay, so parents and children, we are going to add numbers up to 100 today. First of all, I'm going to do a question on the board, and then I'm going to do another question, and we'll talk you through how to do that on paper together. First of all, I'm going to write TU above the numbers in the question and above the space where I'm going to put my answer. So T stands for 10 and U stands for units, because we want to make sure that we're keeping those separate. Now first up, I am going to draw tens and units under here to look a bit like the numicon. Now you will know that a 10 in numicon looks like this. However, to make our lives a little bit easier, I am just going to draw one line and that will represent 10. Now because 32 actually has 3 tens in it, as we can see in the T column, I'm going to draw a total of 3 tens in that column. Now I'm going to draw the units, and I'm going to draw 2 dots like that to look a bit like the numicon. Okay, on to 27. So again, I've got tens, I've got 2 tens here. So I draw 2 lines, and for the 7, I draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dots. And you see how I draw those dots in a way that looks a bit like the numicon as well. Now all we need to do is add those numbers up. When we're adding numbers, we always start with the units. So I know I've got 2 units here. I can see that by the 2 there. And then I count on from 2. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So in total, I have 9 units. Now I've got my units filled in, I can count the tens. So I can see here I've got 1, 2, 3 tens, 4, 5 altogether. So I put 5 in our tens column. So 32 plus 27 equals 59. Now we're going to go on to another question, and you're going to do this one with me and write it down on paper. Okay, now parents, if you remember from the last screen, we are going to ask you to write TU above the letters here. So remember that stands for tens and units. Now we're going to draw in the tens and units. So remember, for each 10, I put just a straight line. Now 41 has 4 tens, so I do 1, 2, 3, 4 tens, and 1 unit, so just 1 there. Now 14, we can see, has 1 10, so I do 1 there and 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you might want to pause the video for a second so you have time to draw that on paper, kids. Remember, you will need lots of room underneath each sum because sometimes your circles and your lines will be quite big. Try and make them neat though if you can. Now we've drawn our tens and units, we start our adding. Remember, we add the units first. So I have 1 unit here, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I write the 5 over here in the units column. Next, we add the tens. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 tens and 5 over here. So we do a 5 in this column. There we go, we have our final answer. Now, try and read that last number and tell your parents what answer you have written there. Now you've learnt to add numbers, you can start work on your worksheet. So you'll do exactly what we did on the board and your parent can help you. Parents, if your child has finished their worksheet and you want them to do a few more questions, you're welcome to write them. Just make sure that the new questions don't have any carrying involved. We'll come on to that later, but only once your child is confident with adding tens and units. So in this video, we're going to be subtracting numbers up to 100. This is very similar to the method that we use for addition. So same prerequisites here. Hopefully your child recognises Newcomb frames, understands tens and units, and has already completed the addition video. When you're starting to subtract on paper, hopefully your child is already quite used to subtracting on their fingers, and it's also a good chance to check that they know that minus means the same as subtract and as take away. So they should be getting used to hearing the language of subtraction even before they start to write it down. So parents and children, you can see that we have the number sentence 48 minus 25 on the board. Just like with addition, we're going to get you to write T, U, T, U, and T, U above where you're going to put your answer. Now, we're going to draw our tens and units in here, again using a single line to represent the 10 and using these little circles to represent the 8. But this time, unlike addition, we are not going to draw anything for our second number, so we're going to leave that blank. So you'll have to remember to do that, kids, because sometimes it's easy to forget. Now, because I'm taking away, I need to take 5 away from 8, and we're starting with the units again. So to take 5 away from 8, I'm going to start at the bottom of my number and just cross out the units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we count how many we have left. We have 1, 2, 3 units left. So I'm going to write that 3 over in my units column. Now we're going to do the same thing with the tens. We have 2 tens over here, so we need to subtract 2 tens from here. I'm going to do 1, 2. And now let's count. We have 1, 2 tens left. So I'm going to write that there. Now kids, can you try and read that number in our answer? So you should have 23 now. Parents, when you're doing these questions, don't miss the opportunity to ask your child to read quite a few of the numbers. Even though they may be pretty good at reading numbers, it doesn't hurt to check occasionally because it's easy for them to forget or mix up numbers just occasionally. Now we have 86 minus 26 on the board. And remember our first step, we're going to write in the tens and the units. Now we're going to draw our tens and units, but remember, we only draw the first number in subtraction. So we have 8 tens, do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 6 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, we're drawing these in the same form as the numicon. Now we're going to subtract. So we look first at the units. We have 6 units to subtract. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So all those units are gone. How many units do I have left? I don't have any units left over here. So as I've got 0 units, I'm going to write a 0 in my units column over there. Now to look at the tens, we have 2 tens. So I will subtract 2 tens from there. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tens left. So I write the 6 in the tens column. Okay kids, so now you should have a worksheet of questions to do. You're going to do a few today and then hopefully do a few more later in the week to remind you of what to do, because we want to make sure you don't forget how to do this. Parents, remember it's really important for the children to continue to write TU, or for you to continue to write it above the numbers and above the space that they're going to put their answer in. If you start leaving that out, you'll find that your child will start to put the units in the tens column and vice versa, and it starts to get very confusing. So do a few of these questions today, maybe 6 to 8 questions today, and then try and find time to do some later in the week.